They want to know what's in this for me. Why should I give you, Ken, the next 20 minutes of my time? What's in it for me? Are you going to make me money? Are you going to show me a new method of reducing my expenses by 20%? I'm in. Show me. Tell me. So again, big picture before details. And that is something that is not only established in the neuroscience, but in anecdotally among most of the entrepreneurs and venture capitalists who I've talked to over the last 20 plus years, almost all of them say, give me the big picture first.
If you're like me and if you're like my most successful clients, 12 months ago, your business was probably doing great. For some of us, business was booming. The American economy was growing at an unprecedented rate, and the future of business could not have looked more promising. I'm Ken Newhouse. To me, building a profitable business isn't only about generating leads and driving sales. It's about who we are and what we're made of. I succeed in business by finding the most effective methods to persuade, inspire, and ignite the imagination of others, and find the most effective methods to persuade, inspire, and ignite the imagination of others to succeed in business. I am the new breed of entrepreneur. Join us on the quest as we search for the newest and most effective methods you can use to get clients now. Hey everybody, Ken Newhouse here, and I want to welcome you to this episode of the Get Clients Now podcast. On today's episode, I sat down with best-selling author, columnist, keynote speaker, former journalist, and former news anchor, Carmine Gallo. Gallo is also a contributor for Forbes.com, where he writes for the Leadership Channel, and he's regarded as one of the world's leading experts in the field of business communication and leadership skills. Gallo has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Success Magazine, Bloomberg, Business Week, and on CNBC. He is an adjunct professor at Harvard University and routinely lectures to MBA students at Stanford University, UCLA, and UC Berkeley. To date, Gallo has had 5 New York Times bestsellers, including The Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs, The Innovation Secrets of Steve Jobs, Talk Like Ted, The Storyteller's Secret, and his latest bestseller, which is actually a runaway bestseller, which we'll be discussing on today's episode, is titled 5 Stars, The Communication Secrets to Get from Good to Great. Carmine's work has not only transformed my business and the businesses of my clients, he's also helped thousands of entrepreneurs, professionals, and business owners who have gone through his coaching programs do the same, and perhaps he can do the same for you. Hey everybody, Ken Newhouse here, and I want to welcome you to this episode of the Get Clients Now podcast. And with me today, I've got best-selling author, multiple-time best-selling author, Mr. Carmine Gallo. So Carmine, on behalf of myself and the members of the Get Clients Now Nation, I want to welcome you to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. Thanks, Ken. Thanks for inviting me. It's a great audience.
Hey, listen, I really appreciate you doing the show today. I am a huge fan, and I won't get in, due to time constraints, I won't get into too many accolades, but suffice it to say that your work has literally made a huge impact in my life and more importantly in my business. And I just want to extend my personal thank you for that.
That makes me very humbled. I'm grateful to hear all that. Ken, this is the type of topic that I'm really passionate about. And I'm passionate about seeing other people succeed and grow and attract customers and grow their businesses because of the content that I have to share. So that gives me a great deal of enthusiasm and fulfillment.
Sweet. Hey, listen, let's do this, Carmine. I like to ask all of my guests when we first start off. So if you could take like a minute or so, give us your backstory. How in the world did you get from the point of wherever you started to becoming a multiple-time best-selling author, and now you're also teaching, I think, twice a year, or you were, at Harvard University. You're teaching people who are not necessarily like regular students. These are people who are super like at the pinnacle of success in business. How did you get there? Give us the backstory if you could.
That's a great segue. I do teach a program at Harvard in the Department of Executive Education. So speaking of executives, that's exactly how I transitioned from journalism to executive communication, coaching, and also writing books. A short story is I went to UCLA. I was on a path to becoming a lawyer. I was in pre-law at the time. This is LA, where lawyers are making a lot of money and you're just surrounded by that. So I was taking pre-law, but then I realized that I'm much more interested in, I found myself going to libraries and reading speeches. There was a journal called Vital Speeches of the Day. And I recall reading great speeches and getting into history and watching terrific communicators and thinking, I want something to do with that, with speech and with words and with moving people with your words. So I got into journalism. I went to Medill, which is a Northwestern master's degree program. And I spent 15 years, this is where I'll cut the story, and fast forward, I spent 15 years in journalism.
Today, we find ourselves solidly entrenched in the heart of the new knowledge economy. The rules of business and what it takes to be successful have changed. To add insult to injury, you now have to navigate your business successfully through the coronavirus pandemic, which has brought complication and difficulty none of us could have ever imagined. In the back of your mind, you know that for your business to remain viable and profitable, you're going to have to formulate a new, more effective strategy.
But that's when I began to realize, especially when I was doing business news, and for all of your listeners who watch CNBC or other business programs, they'll understand this. You begin to see the same faces. You see the same analysts, economists, stock experts. Why? Why are they the same faces? Are they the most expert? Not necessarily. In fact, many of their predictions are often wrong, but they can communicate far more effectively than anybody else. That was the turning point for me, when I began to realize that it is the communication skills, the skills of persuasion, public speaking, that could really set people apart. And because I enjoyed writing, I started writing books. I wrote The Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs. And I began teaching those types of techniques. And so that's what got me to where I am today.
So, Carmine, what's something about you that the marketplace, typically like your fans, people that follow you, because I know there are millions and millions of people that follow you online, especially on social media. What's something about you that the marketplace, your fans, don't know about you? They typically don't know, but you'd like them to know.
I think one of the things that they probably don't know about me is I spend more time learning, studying history and behavioral psychology than I do public speaking. and especially in the last, say, decade, I wish I could be a historian or someone who can write, narrative fiction, like Eric Larson, who wrote *The Splendid and the Vile* about Winston Churchill. I wish I could write like that. I'm very good at writing business nonfiction, just information. And hopefully I write it in a way that is informative and actionable and keeps people somewhat entertained. But I am really a big history buff. And in the last 10 years, I've been getting into behavioral psychology in a big way, the Daniel Kahneman's research. Because I realized that, and this goes back to exactly what we're talking about today, which is persuasion and communication skills. Nothing has changed.
In spite of knowing that we're now solidly entrenched in the new knowledge economy, and in spite of the changes coronavirus has brought to the marketplace, something inside you clings to the hope that somehow our world and our economy will return to the way it was a few short months ago. Driven by the hope that the status quo will return, you refuse to adapt and change the strategy that drives your business.
The human mind is the same today as it was hundreds of thousands of years ago. But we're having this podcast over new technology. We're Zooming in the last 4 months, but the human brain has not changed. So the more you understand about psychology and the way people process information, the more effective you can be. So I'm actually far more interested in history and behavioral psychology than I am in just plain old public speaking.
That's awesome. Those are two of my passions as well. Let me ask you this. I've noticed, and certainly you highlighted this in the book beautifully, but I think more than at any time in history, we have an abundance of very highly qualified, very highly skilled technical people. But why is it that so many people are failing when it comes to business, not just as an employee, but when it comes to actually small business owners, professionals that are very technically savvy? You know, as an example, I work with a lot of dentists. I'm a contributor for Dental Town, work with a lot of chiropractors, work with a lot of coaches and consultants. A lot of these people, when it comes to like the technical aspect of it, are superiorly qualified, yet they're failing miserably because of a lack of skill. There's another important skill that you brought out in a book. So what is that skill, and why are these, well, first of all, why are these people failing so miserably? And what's that skill that they're really missing that's leading to this failure?
Well, certainly the skill of persuasion and storytelling. Remember that persuasion, by definition, simply means combining words and ideas to move people to action. Throughout history and today, the greatest communicators, the people who stand out, have this ability to take their ideas, form words around their ideas, and convince you to back their ideas, to go on that journey with you. I think where people fail is they don't appreciate the fact, Ken, and you know this full well, it's a skill. Storytelling, how to tell a story that grabs you and attracts you and inspires you and wants and makes someone want to follow you. That's a skill that, like any craft, like any skill, is acquired, and you can build it, but it does take effort. Opening PowerPoint is easy. The reason why most people see bad PowerPoint slides, for example, and we all complain about PowerPoint, don't we? We still do.
Leading neuroscientists, entrepreneurs, and business leaders all agree. Mastering the ancient art of persuasion, combining words and ideas to move people to action, is no longer a soft skill. It is the fundamental skill to get from good to great in the age of ideas. Carmine Gallo is considered one of the world's leading experts in the field of business communication and leadership skills. Using his methods, I've been able to transform my business and to help transform the businesses of my clients and members. Perhaps he can do the same for you.
As soon as you say, I'm going to show you a PowerPoint, the eyes glaze over and the yawns start, and people say, no, please, no more PowerPoint. Why? It's not the tool, it's the way we use the tool. It's easy to open a slide and start filling in the text with bullet points. It's the least effective way of communicating information. Not PowerPoint itself, but text on a slide in bullet point form. Least effective way. And yet we do it because it's easy. What you and I are talking about today, and the reason why this whole 5 stars, I kind of use this as a metaphor, is because it takes work to get from average to great. It takes work. It's a skill. And it is a skill that people work on. But the positive is that it is a skill that you can build. Remember, in my book here, I talk about Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett was terrified of public speaking. He did not consider himself a good public speaker. He took a Dale Carnegie course. And in a true story, he dropped out of the course because he didn't want to speak in front of a group. So he took a public speaking course and dropped out of it because he was afraid of public speaking. He took it again. And to this day, Warren Buffett, one of the richest people in the world, most successful, has said that public speaking is the single greatest skill that you can build to set yourself apart and to be successful. Skill. It's a skill. And like any skill, you got to work at it. So Ken, sometimes people, one, they don't realize that it is a skill that they can build. And 2, they don't realize that because it's a skill, it takes work. That whole 10,000 hour rule, it applies.
Carmine, explain to us how prolific this problem is throughout the business community in America, especially, and what's going to happen to those individuals, those companies that don't invest the time in learning how to become better storytellers, become more persuasive communicators. And I'm going to get to the guarantee of your book here in just a minute, but if you could pick up with that question, and then I'm going to do the quick guarantee and let people know that this is a book they definitely want to have in their library.
Well, we know that communication skills, or the lack of communication skills, is without question a failure in our professional world, that most people don't have it. And we know as a fact, because if you look at all the surveys, almost every survey conducted by LinkedIn or HR people or corporate recruiters.
If you're like me and if you're like my most successful clients, many of these changes have caught you off guard. As we get deeper into the knowledge economy, the situation can get even worse. And unless you master the skill sets that can turn everything around for you, the consequences you and your business face could be catastrophic. The skill sets I'm referring to is the ancient art of persuasive communication. You're now beginning to realize that becoming a more persuasive, more skilled communicator is fundamental to your success in the new knowledge economy.
They all say the same thing, that the number one skill, which is in the highest demand and the lowest supply, is public speaking and communication. So we don't have to look far to find evidence that very few people have those public speaking skills that will set them apart. But that's the positive. That's the benefit here for all of our listeners. We know that this is a skill that you can build. And if you build it just by getting a little better in expressing your ideas, you can stand apart in ways that you had never imagined.
Yeah, the book In the Land of the Blind, The One-Eyed Man is King, is a book that's written some time ago, but there you go right there. Let's do this very quickly. You guys know that every guest that I have on my show, I won't have a guest on the show if I cannot fully back and guarantee their work. So I want you to invest not only in the 5 stars, this most recent book that Carmine wrote, 2018, Talk Like Ted, I'm going to include in that. The Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs, which is one of the first books written long ago. It's one of my first books I had of Carmine's. I think it was the first. And then also The Storyteller Secret. So I'm not just going to guarantee one book today. I want you to invest in all 4 of these books. Use them. First, read them, obviously. Use them. You will benefit multiples, not only of the money you spend on the book, but of your time. Remember, we can always get more clients. We can always make more money. We can never get more time. So I value your time and I respect your time immensely. If you can't say that after investing in these books, email me at customerservice@kennewhouse.com. I will reimburse you for one or all of them, no questions asked. This is a resource. These are books. These are resources you absolutely have to have, hands down. So Carmen, now that I've gotten the guarantee, and I want to ask kind of a follow-up question to that question I just asked. So you referenced in the book something called the knowledge economy. And so we're at a point now where, as you just mentioned, the people who have the ability to communicate persuasively, whether it's through stories, all the different aspects of solid communication, they're going to do well. But what was the catalyst that actually brought us from the economy where technical savvy really puts you at the top of the heap to now that in and of itself is not enough? And is there an individual or a circumstance that's kind of responsible for these so many people not being adequately equipped to be able to tell stories and communicate at such a high level?
Yeah, there are incidents that are responsible for where we are today. And there are certainly individuals who have brought it to my attention, both business professionals and historians. I took the first part of this new book, 5 Stars, just to explain briefly how we came to where we are today. So I'll take 30 seconds.
Scientists studying blood flow in the brain have now discovered the secrets to effective communication, the exact reasons why certain words, speakers, and styles make an emotional connection with the rest of us. While the tools we use to communicate have evolved, the way our brains are wired to consume information has not. Becoming a master of persuasive communication takes effort, hard work, and dedication. As people like me and Carmine work to help you achieve this goal, others may question this approach. Some may even criticize you for trying. For some, the difficulty they now face, combined with the added stress of learning new skills, will be more than they can handle. They will fail, then quit. But not you. You're on a mission. You have a purpose bigger than yourself that drives you to succeed.
In the agricultural economy, and this is the way sociologists have presented it to me, during the ag economy, which is most of human history, your value was locked up in the land. And yet one person who could plow the land a little faster than their neighbor didn't necessarily see a huge gain in wealth. During the industrial age, our wealth was locked up in a few factory owners, a handful of titans, and then everybody else was working on the factory floors. Just because you could assemble a widget faster than the person next to you didn't necessarily mean that you would see a significant increase in wealth. And then something happened where we became the knowledge economy, where our value is locked up in your ideas. And that's why people like Warren Buffett and others have said that if you can express your ideas a little better than the person next to you, you can see a significant increase in wealth that is far more dramatic than at any time in human history. That to me, that discussion is what opened my mind to writing about 5 stars, because I realized that average is not good enough. Average only guarantees below average results. And yet a lot of people who I have been talking to over the last few years, business professionals, people who are promoted faster than others, people who get a job that maybe they weren't necessarily qualified for compared to a competitor, people who have gotten Ivy League educations or got into schools that they didn't think they were getting into, that they didn't think they were qualified for. The reason why some of these professionals leapfrog others is because they have superior communication skills. So that kind of reminds me that we are in a world of ideas. And there's a lot of ideas that are never going to see daylight. A lot of ideas are going to die on the vine. Ideas that could be helping us right now, probably, with all these big issues that we're facing, from health to climate. These are huge, massive issues that we're facing. Imagine all the good ideas that are not getting heard because they're not communicated effectively. So again, a world that's based on ideas means that each and every one of us has the obligation to ourselves and to the rest of society to express those ideas clearly and in a way that moves people to take action on your ideas.
Okay, and so to follow that up in the book, and I'm not sure how long ago Aristotle lived. I know it was well before the time of Jesus. So, I mean, like 3,000 years ago. It was a long, long time ago, but
2,300 something. Yes.
Okay. So it was a long time ago, but in the book, you brought it out and it was, I've never heard it presented this way. And I really, really enjoyed it. And I got a lot out of it. The next question that I wanted to ask you deals with something that you talked about in the book where you said, and I'm paraphrasing this part, but you said storytelling is the best vehicle for transferring emotion from one human being to another. And then you said persuasive communication follows the Aristotelian method. Tell us what the Aristotelian method is and what in the world is the rule of 3?
Well, I'll start with the rule of 3. The rule of 3 is the most powerful number in persuasion theory. And it simply means that in short-term memory, people are only capable of keeping 3 or 4 points of information, which is why even if you have a phone number that could be up to 7 digits, you chunk it into 3 and 4 because that's the easiest way to remember.
You're now 100% committed to become a master of persuasive communication. You're ready to begin your training, but thoughts arise in your mind. Is this really the right thing for me to pursue? Is becoming a master of persuasive communication the solution for helping my business survive and thrive? If I get this right, it could transform my business and my life. But if I get this wrong, well, I don't even want to consider that.
I have used the rule, once I learned that many, many years ago, just studying communication, I got to tell you, Ken, it really opened up an entirely different world, and it is the most powerful number. Everything is grouped in threes. Even the most famous slogans like "Just do it." There is a reason why 3 is sort of a complete set. It's more satisfying than 2, and much easier to remember than 28. So 3. Well, what's interesting is all of this does come back to a guy who is really smart and knew a lot about persuasion. That's Aristotle. Some 2,000 years ago, Aristotle wrote The Rhetoric, which was the first time somebody had tried to, actually condense and write about and analyze what is it about speakers that is convincing and persuasive and can inspire other people, other listeners. Well, much of what we think about today in terms of persuasion and communication was originally handed down to us from Aristotle. So the rule of 3 is something that even Aristotle was talking about, which is breaking up a story into 3 parts. We always say a story has a beginning, middle, and an end. Well, guess what? Aristotle said that 2,000 years ago. That was his point. A great story has to have these 3 parts. So he actually was an advocate of breaking up content into 3 pieces. The Aristotle formula or method of persuasion also falls under 3. And he believed that in order for persuasion to occur, 3 elements had to exist. He called them ethos, logos, and pathos. And it's still a big part of all great speeches fall under these 3. Very quickly, I can do it in 30 seconds or so. Ethos simply means credibility. So you have to have credibility. A speaker has to have credibility. So if you're applying for a job, that is your resume, your background, your skills, your credentials. Ethos, credibility. Logos is making an appeal to reason. So that's the facts, the figures, the statistics, the logical appeal. You have a problem, I have a solution. My solution will help you solve your problem, and we all live happily ever after. But Aristotle believed that, and you can trace this to any great speech today, that in order for persuasion to occur, it cannot occur in the absence of what he called pathos, which is emotion. Greatest tool we have to transfer emotion to one another is story, which is why we focus on storytelling.
Okay, and so one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, and it kind of segues, it's kind of like the tail end of that question. I think they're linked, and you can tell me whether or not you think they are, but I'm confused about this one particular subject. As it deals with starting off our communication, here's my point of confusion. I need your help. Do we start with the big overarching idea that's going to help our prospect, if it, as it were, kind of see things in our light, or do we start by focusing on, i.e. the big problem like Jobs did, Steve Jobs, and you noted that greatly in your book, The Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs. Which one of those two, are they the same, are they different, or help me here clarify this, because like I said, this was kind of a personal question I was confused about, but I think other people can benefit from it.
Ken, good question, and it's something I'm still working through. Look, communication is a gray area, is it not? I mean, it is complicated.
Especially if you're married.
I like that. I need to use that line sometime. You can see 2 people, they have very different styles, and yet they're both engaging and inspiring and effective.
You have prepared yourself, studied, and now possess many of the skill sets necessary to make you a master of persuasive communication. You're now at that juncture in the road, a point where the decision must be made to restructure your business strategy, deploy and implement what you've learned. It's time to leave the old way of doing business behind and leap into the new knowledge economy, fully armed and ready to do battle with your new skills. You know that it's too late to go back to the way that it was, and you face the challenge ahead with supreme confidence.
I like to look at it like this. I mean, look, people like Steve Jobs obviously were skilled at presentations. He worked on them for decades, and he was a master of the craft. I mean, he was the greatest business storyteller of our time.
Yeah.
In the average sales meeting, whether it's virtual or in person, People don't have a lot of time. This is not a captive audience waiting for Steve Jobs to emerge from the stage and they'll give him the next 2 hours and be hooked on every word he says. I like to start most presentations, sales meetings, anytime you're trying to move someone to take action on your idea, I do like to start with the big picture.
Okay.
And there is neuroscience to support this, that people see the big picture before the details. In other words, they just want a roadmap. They want to know what's in this for me. Why should I give you, Ken, the next 20 minutes of my time? What's in it for me? Are you going to make me money? Are you going to show me a new method of reducing my expenses by 20%? I'm in. Show me. Tell me. So again, big picture before details. And that is something that is not only established in the neuroscience, but anecdotally among most of the entrepreneurs and venture capitalists who I've talked to over the last 20 plus years, almost all of them say, give me the big picture first. Give me a reason to listen to the rest of the conversation. This isn't a novel, Ken. Remember,
Right.
We're not talking novel. So sales pitch, I don't want you to wait till the end of the novel. Okay? I'm not taking you into these suspenseful areas and breaking this up into chapters. And
Right.
these are two different types of communication. If I'm trying to get you to move and inspiring you to take action or to sell you something, I better get to the big picture and get to it fast.
Okay. So just a quick observation and then a comment. And you can, after I give you the comment, you can just give me a real short yes or no. I think that's pretty close. So then here's kind of the question, so to speak. Would the big overarching problem be encapsulated in the big picture? Would it be part of, like, the predominant part of the overall big picture? It would be included in that. And then my comment would be, it never dawned on me, as long as I've been a client of his, mean old Dan Kennedy, many, 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 many years. But I never understood until I started paying attention to The Storyteller's Secret and then this new book, 5 Stars. And it just leapt off the pages at me. But Dan Kennedy's problem, agitate, solve is the story structure. And your books, like, I think it not only did it help me become they helped me become a better communicator, more persuasive, but no doubt they're going to help my copywriting just go through the roof, because you opened up literally, like I said when I talked to Jonah Berger, it's like something right before your eyes, and it's so obvious you don't see it. And I got to tell you, you're super talented at being able to take things that are kind of obvious, but they're so obvious, in fact, they're almost impossible for most of us to see, and you brought that out. So I wanted to say thanks for that. But as far as the big picture and then the big problem, would it be, am I understanding this correctly, that the big problem is like a pretty predominant part of the overall big picture that we want to start with?
If you can incorporate a person's problem into the big picture, that would be a complete win.
Okay.
Ask yourself, put yourself in the other person's shoes, okay?
Yeah.
And think about the question that they're asking. I learned this in Journalism 101, by the way, Ken. And the first thing you have to ask is, why should my reader or listener care?
Right.
Why should they care? You have to answer that in the first paragraph of a printed piece or even in the title. Online today, if you want to write anything or blog for any type of digital platform, you need to be able to address the solution that you're offering in the headline or the first paragraph. So yeah, I do incorporate that in a big picture.
After deploying your new skills and the new model you created for your business, you're starting to see the fruit of your labor. You're starting to win again, and you can see that the business success that you thought had been lost forever is now within your reach. You see the horizon clearly, and now it's time that everyone around you sees it as well.
People all have their own goals, dreams, aspirations. If you can show me how your idea, product, service will help me achieve my dream, and you can do that in the first 20 seconds of a conversation, I'd love to see your PowerPoint. Go. So I've got one example that I often use on this. True story. The Google guys, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, walked into the office of Sequoia Capital, and they pitched at that time, one of the biggest venture capitalists in the world, a guy named Michael Moritz. I interviewed Michael Moritz. And Michael Moritz said something fascinating to me that completely changed the way I look at communication. And I've written about it in several of my books. Michael Moritz said he was so impressed because the Google guys walked into his office and said, we've created a new product, a new technology that will assemble the world's information and make it available in one click. Wow. So gather the world's information and make it available in one click. Fine. That's fantastic. Tell me, show me, give me a demo. The point of it, and Michael Moritz said, if you are an entrepreneur and you cannot express your idea in one sentence, he's not interested because he needs to see the big picture first. And it shows that you've actually thought through this.
Yep.
That you understand the problem, you understand the solution. So I love that as an exercise, and it's very hard. How would you pitch your product in one sentence?
That's like the big idea in copywriting that's talked about in direct marketing copywriting. You have to have a big idea, and if you don't have a big idea, people aren't going to get your copy. So what I'd like you to do, if you could, if we take a look at presentations, and you can just give 2 or 3 examples, comparisons, what would be the example of a presentation done poorly versus a presentation that's done effectively, done well, i.e. very persuasively?
Okay. And do you want public presentations or just...
Could be a sales presentation. Just anytime we're interacting with, say, a prospect. Could be a group of people we're trying to sell. Could be an individual. Whatever comes to mind will work.
Oh, sure. Okay. So a poor presentation versus a persuasive presentation. Well, we don't have to look much further than Steve Jobs in the 2007 iPhone presentation. It is one of, often considered, the best corporate or business presentation of all time. So there's a difference between a Steve Jobs style presentation and a poor sales presentation. Okay. So a persuasive presentation would have a story structure. A poor presentation, and thanks for giving me this idea. This is actually a really interesting way of breaking it up. So a persuasive presentation would have a story structure. A poor presentation has no structure. A poor presentation is just, like we've talked about, bad PowerPoint, slides, bullets, information, no structure. Story structure, something that you've talked about on your other podcasts, is something into a narrative form, into 3 acts, which is what Steve Jobs did. So for example, Act 1 would be the state of the world as it is today. Here is what this industry looks like today. Act 2 is conflict, hurdles, problems, challenges with the state of the world. Act 3 would be, here is how my hero, that could be you, it could be your company, it could be a product, it could be your customer. How is the hero going to solve these challenges and be transformed and live happily ever after?
The pressure you once felt as those around you questioned your decisions has now been replaced by an inner feeling of accomplishment, immense pride, and supreme confidence. Those around you finally recognize that you were right all along.
Steve Jobs was brilliant at creating that type of structure. So I think overall, Ken, a persuasive presentation has structure. Poor presentation is just bullet points and random information with zero structure or zero consideration with how it comes across. I also think a persuasive presentation is going to be image rich. If you're using a PowerPoint, it's going to have more pictures than words, or limited words, or multimedia elements like videos and photos and images and animations. A poor sales presentation is the one the one that we are familiar with. All words, all text, no imagery, So images versus no images. Now you can also do that verbally. Let's get away from a PowerPoint. Forget about a presentation. You can also create images verbally, which is why an advanced skill, which I talk about in 5 stars because it's more of an advanced communication book. An advanced skill is analogy and metaphor. Very few people use metaphor effectively. Metaphor, comparing one thing that's tangible or abstract to something that's familiar. Warren Buffett is brilliant at metaphor. I think all financial experts should be good at metaphor. Warren Buffett only invests in companies that have a moat around the castle that prevents outsiders or competitors from entering the industry. Now, if you watch CNBC, everybody's talking about the moat. Does that company have a moat around it? I like this stock because it's got a moat around it. That comes from Warren Buffett. But again, he's always thinking about how do I communicate this information in analogy? So there is a way of creating presentations that's more vivid imagery. So you can imagery could either be photos and images or the way you explain things with vivid imagery of metaphors and analogies.
All right, last question, and then I'm going to ask you how people can find out more about you. So Carmine, what's the one question today that I didn't ask that I should have asked you?
What's the most effective story to tell?
Okay, that was actually one of my questions, but what's the most effective, what style or type of story is the most effective to tell? What is it?
The most effective story that anyone can tell is a personal story, personal anecdote with a little tension or a little struggle thrown in there. Most of us know the Starbucks story of how Howard Schultz grew up in a poor area of Brooklyn in a housing development, and his family struggled to make ends meet. His father was hurt on the job, did not have health insurance, and no way to support his family. And it's at that time that a young Howard Schultz dedicated himself to not only business and being successful in business, but if he was in a position to work with other people, he would build a company that would treat people with respect. And Starbucks became the very first large company to offer full health benefits to part-time workers, stock options, and other benefits.
You face this challenge successfully and come out the other side on top. You possess new skill sets, new insights, and understanding, and you're now prepared for any challenges that come your way. You understand that persuasive communication is not about manipulation, chicanery, or shenanigans, but it's about understanding human behavior, what it takes to effectively communicate your message to the marketplace, and help prospects realize the benefits you offer them. You're now prepared to take your business to new heights, new levels of success that you never imagined possible.
That backstory, personal story with struggle that created the company and its values. That is the ultimate connection story, which is why Howard Schultz tells that story all the time. And he's told it for 20 plus years. And no one gets tired of hearing the story because it connects with all of us. We all struggle in some way, and we all want to see a light at the end of the tunnel. So personal story with struggle, most effective story you could ever tell. Make sure please be true. Please be true. Because if people find out it's not true, then you've ruined all of your trust and credibility.
Yeah, you're done if you aren't honest. So integrity is a key part of it. You got time for 2 quick questions?
Sure.
Okay, so here's another one where I'm going to actually read. This one is a literal quote from your book, 5 stars. So I just want to read this, and then I have just a very short question that you can help shed some light on. Here's the quote. Good communication is hard. Being an effective communicator takes creativity. You have to think through these things. You have to think through the narrative that you want to tell. How am I going to tell it? What are the words I'm going to use? The level of sophistication of your audience, the data you use, this is hard work. Here's my question. If you could talk about the characteristics and attributes of presentations, you don't have to run through like a comprehensive list, but just kind of give an idea that are, some notable points. the characteristics and attributes of presentations that are persuasive, i.e. effective, versus those that are ineffective or not persuasive.
When we say that it does take work, I do believe that. I don't want to scare off your audience, but when you look at great speakers of the past, even people like Martin Luther King, for example, everybody knows the I Have a Dream speech. Well, in some of my research, I discovered that he had only delivered that speech after he had delivered about 2,500 speeches before. Steve Jobs, the iPhone presentation in 2007 was one of the greatest presentations of all time. But if you watch his early presentation, like from 30 years earlier,
right,
very different speaker. People get better. It is a skill. And like any skill, you can get better at public speaking and communication. But there are fundamental commonalities. I'm not saying that they're easy to achieve, but they are common features of all great presentations. Steve Jobs was one of them. One, they do practice. Great speakers tend to practice much more than average. They practice in real world conditions. In other words, they will stand up and deliver a full-blown presentation as they would in front of a live audience or virtually. They go through the whole presentation out loud. There's a lot of practice and rehearsal. It's a performance. A persuasive presentation hits the rule of three. Instead of dumping 82 pages of PowerPoint slides on me with no structure, they tend to break it up into a simple structure that I can follow. There are 3 reasons why this product is the best available product for your needs. 1, 2, and 3. Got it. Thank you. It's condensed. There are entire books on why removing content and removing information is more powerful than adding information. But Ken, that gets back to the point we've been making. This does take work. The reason why most PowerPoint presentations or any other type of slideshow presentation are truly awful is because that's easy. It's easy for us to open a PowerPoint slide and fill it in with text and bullets. That's easy. It's a lot harder to decide on a structure. It's much harder to structure a PowerPoint and use a narrative and choose the right images and photographs and practice and condense, make it as short and concise as possible, but still substantive. That takes work. It takes creativity. But boy, that a little extra work will make you so much more persuasive and ultimately more successful.
All right, Carmine, I want to ask you an additional question. I don't normally do this, but let's do this. I have been helped so much. My business has been helped so dramatically by not only the things that you teach in your books, but the other information that I've had access to that you have. If you could, I know you have coaching programs. If you could share information about your coaching programs as well, because what I want to do in addition to guaranteeing your book for our fans and members of the Get Clients Now Nation, I also want to guarantee the coaching program that you offer. So if you could, take a few minutes, take a minute or 2, maybe 3, tell us about your coaching program. And then guys, you got me on the air here. I'm going to guarantee that if you invest in Carmine's coaching program, you're going to get multiples of what you invest in his program. So Carmine, if you could, like I said, take a minute or 2, tell us about what you have, and we'll run with that.
Yes. If anybody wants to reach me, they can reach me through carminegallo.com, which is my website. I am a speaker. I speak to groups. Obviously, I speak in associations. I speak to people all over the world. In a virtual world, I do a lot of coaching with either one-on-one executive coaching or with small groups and sales groups. The cool thing about having the broadband capability and Zoom calls and virtual meetings is that I can reach people all over the world, which is what I've been doing. So yes, please, if anybody would like to contact me for much more in-depth coaching, I'm open to it. I'm very receptive to it. I'd love to talk to you. CarmineGallo.com.
So let's do this just very quickly. What's the best way for people not only to buy your books, I'm going to assume on Amazon, but what's the best people to find out more about you personally? Because I know you have some training, some coaching, things like that.
If you can remember a good Italian name like Carmine Gallo, you can find me. My website is carminegallo.com, Gallo. So Carmine Gallo. You can find me on Twitter, Carmine Gallo. Please follow me on social media or go to my website. And you can contact me directly through my website and I'll get back to you.
Sweet. Hey, listen, I appreciate your time. I know you got to run. I got to run. Good luck to you. Thanks for doing the show. And I will give Vanessa a heads up when the show's going to go live.
Our objective with this podcast is to help you and your business stand out in the marketplace by crystallizing your messaging, marketing, and communications. On behalf of the whole Ken Newhouse team, thanks for listening.